Before mortals could write, they carved their gods in stone. And of all the pantheons ever imagined, none was more feared, more desired, more vividly rendered in marble than the gods of ancient Greece. Tonight we walk the halls of their greatest temples and museums. Every Olympian, every hero, every monster. And by the time we reach the final sculpture, the one the sculptors almost never dared to show, you'll understand why the Greeks believed their gods were watching from the stone itself. We begin where all Greek religion begins, Mount Olympus. 12 gods ruled from its peak, and each demanded to be carved in marble, bronze, and stone. The Greeks understood something we have almost forgotten, that a god without a face is no god at all. So they gave them faces. Terrible, beautiful, immortal faces. And in doing so, they trapped something of divinity inside the rock itself. First, the king himself. Zeus, lord of the sky, wielder of the thunderbolt, the god who seduced mortals by transforming into animals, swans, eagles, even golden rain. The Greeks showed him bearded and commanding, muscles carved with the precision of a warrior, one hand raised as if he had just hurled lightning. But his eyes always held a terrible knowledge, the weight of ruling an empire of gods who constantly betrayed him. His weakness, his obsession with mortal women. Zeus fathered so many illegitimate children that the entire Greek mythology is essentially a genealogy of his infidelities. Heracles, Perseus, Helen of Troy, all bastards of the King of Heaven. And yet the Greeks never condemned him for it. Instead, they sculpted his power and his hunger in the same breath, as if godhood itself was inseparable from desire and consequence. Then there is Poseidon, god of the sea. Bearded like his brother Zeus, but wilder, less concerned with order and more obsessed with rage. The sculptors gave him a trident instead of a thunderbolt, a weapon that looked less like authority and more like chaos itself. He was the god mortals feared most at sea, the one who could conjure storms with a gesture, who could drown armies with a single wave. But Poseidon was also known for his cruelty. The Greeks told stories of his rage, how he punished those who disrespected him, how he cursed entire families across generations. One woman, Medusa, caught his attention in a temple of Athena, and when Athena found them together, she transformed Medusa into a monster with serpents for hair. Poseidon did nothing to stop it. That was the nature of the gods, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Athena came next, goddess of wisdom and warfare, the only Olympian born without a mother. Zeus birthed her from his own head, fully formed and armored. The sculptors adored her. In marble, she stands tall and composed, eyes alert, hand resting on a spear. Unlike Poseidon's rage, Athena's power was intellectual. She won battles through strategy, not strength. She defeated her rivals through wisdom, not cruelty. Yet even wisdom has its dark side. Athena was known for her vengeance. She punished those who challenged her with methods that were methodical and cruel. She cursed Medusa not as a protective act but as retaliation for being seduced in her own temple. And she never forgave those who crossed her. In stone, her face is beautiful but cold, the beauty of someone who has never felt genuine emotion, only the weight of perfect judgment. Apollo comes next, god of the sun, music, prophecy, and healing. Unlike his uncle Poseidon and his sister Athena, Apollo was often sculpted as almost beautiful in a human way, young and radiant. The Greeks carved him with curled hair and idealized features, often holding a lyre. He represented everything the Greeks aspired to: order, beauty, intellect, and divine grace. He was the god they wanted to be. But Apollo was also the god of plague and death. His arrows could kill from a distance, and his prophecies often drove mortals to madness. The Trojan priest Laocoon questioned Apollo and was killed by serpents. The nymph Daphne fled his advances and was transformed into a laurel tree. Beauty and terror were inseparable in Apollo's nature. The sculptors captured this duality perfectly. In stone, he smiles, but his eyes are hollow with knowledge of suffering he has caused. Artemis, Apollo's twin sister, was the goddess of the hunt and the moon. Where Apollo commanded the day, Artemis ruled the night and the wild places. The sculptors depicted her as fierce and independent, armed with bow and arrows, sometimes flanked by a stag or hunting dog. She was the only major Olympian who rejected marriage entirely, who chose the eternal hunt over the complications of love and family. Yet Artemis was ruthless in defense of her boundaries. When the hunter Actaeon stumbled upon her bathing, she transformed him into a deer and watched as his own hounds tore him apart. She punished those who violated her sacred spaces with finality and no mercy. In stone, her face is younger than Athena's, more vital but equally dangerous. She is the wild made manifest, untamed and utterly merciless. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, was perhaps the most dangerous of all the Olympians. While the others wielded thunderbolts and tridents and wisdom, Aphrodite wielded desire itself. The Greeks sculpted her as absolutely flawless, sometimes emerging from a shell, sometimes adjusting her hair, sometimes caught in the moment of undressing. She was irresistible by definition, and that irresistibility was her weapon. But desire is a curse as much as a gift. The Trojan War itself was born from Aphrodite's promise to Paris that he could have Helen, the most beautiful woman alive. That single promise killed thousands and burned an entire civilization to ash. In the sculptures, Aphrodite often wears a knowing smile, as if she understands the ruin her beauty will cause and welcomes it. Power without responsibility is perhaps the most terrifying power of all. Ares was the god of war itself. But unlike Athena, whose warfare was strategic and noble, Ares represented the chaos and bloodlust of battle. The sculptors showed him heavily muscled, often armored, sometimes with a spear or sword held high. He was crude compared to the other Olympians, less refined, more primal. The Greeks actually despised him even as they feared him, because he represented the ugliest aspects of conflict. What the Greeks understood was that not all gods deserved reverence, some deserved fear. Ares was frequently defeated in their stories. Athena beat him in combat through superior tactics. Heracles made him beg for mercy. The sculptors gave him a scarred, brutal face, less beautiful than any other Olympian. In stone, he looks like what he was, necessary but despicable, a force that must exist but should never be celebrated. Hephaestus, the craftsman god, stands in stark contrast. Lame and disfigured, rejected by even his own mother Hera, he was the only Olympian who didn't fit the standard of divine beauty. Yet he was indispensable. Every weapon, every tool, every object of value in the Greek world was attributed to Hephaestus. The sculptors sometimes showed him at his forge, hammer raised, or sometimes simply as he was, imperfect, powerful, utterly necessary. Hephaestus reveals something profound about Greek thought, that power and worth aren't determined by beauty or physical perfection. He could forge the unbreakable chains that bound Prometheus, the shields of heroes, the arrows of gods. His disability was real in the sculptures, carved without disguise or shame. In a culture obsessed with the human form, Hephaestus stood as a reminder that the most valuable contributions often come from those the world has cast aside. Hera, queen of the Olympians and wife to Zeus, was sculpted with regal majesty. She wears a crown, holds a scepter, and sits with the authority of an empress. And yet her story in the mythology is one of relentless betrayal. Zeus's countless infidelities were a constant humiliation. The sculptors captured her rage barely contained beneath her composed exterior. In stone, she is magnificent, but it's the magnificence of a woman who has been wronged beyond measure and will never forget. And Hera's revenge was legendary. She tormented Heracles, the illegitimate son of Zeus, throughout his entire life. She drove Io mad and across the world as a cow. She punished Semele with a lie that resulted in her own death. In Greek mythology, Hera is the goddess of marriage, yet she embodies the destruction that marriage can contain when built on betrayal and inequality. Her sculptures are beautiful, but it's a terrible beauty, the kind that makes you understand why she was feared more than loved. Now we move from the Olympians to the heroes, mortals who achieved such greatness that they were elevated to something approaching divinity. And chief among them was Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene. His life, rendered in marble and stone, was one long struggle against impossible odds. The sculptors showed him muscled beyond human proportion, often holding his famous lion-skin cloak, a weapon he had won in his first great feat. Heracles was born to be a slave. Hera's hatred of his very existence meant his entire life was a series of near-impossible labors. 12 of them became legendary, killing the Nemean lion whose hide was impervious to all weapons, defeating the Hydra with its regenerating heads, capturing the golden hind of Artemis, and more. Each sculpture in the museum seems to show him in the midst of one of these struggles, muscles straining, sometimes victorious, sometimes barely surviving. Perseus was another hero born of Zeus's infidelity. His mother was a mortal princess locked in a bronze tower by her paranoid father. Perseus grew up hearing this story of divine assault, and yet he became one of the greatest heroes of Greece. The sculptors depicted him at the moment of his greatest triumph, holding high the severed head of Medusa, the Gorgon monster whose gaze could turn men to stone. It is the most iconic image in all of Greek sculpture. But the story of Medusa is not a simple tale of good versus evil. She was not born a monster. She was a mortal woman, beautiful and innocent, until Poseidon assaulted her in Athena's temple. Athena, furious at the violation of her sacred space, transformed Medusa into a Gorgon, cursed her into a monster as punishment for being raped. The Greeks understood the horror of this injustice, yet they still celebrated Perseus for killing her. In marble, Medusa's face is anguished, her serpent hair writhing, her eyes showing the weight of an unbearable curse. Theseus was another great hero, sometimes called the Athenian Heracles. Like Heracles, he faced impossible trials. He navigated the labyrinth and slew the Minotaur, a creature half man and half bull that fed on Athenian youth. The sculptures show him often with a sword and sometimes with a ball of thread, the thread that allowed him to retrace his steps through the impossible maze. He represented intelligence as much as strength, cunning as much as courage. The greatest of all heroes was Achilles, the warrior whose name became synonymous with invincibility itself. Born of a goddess and a mortal king, he was prophesied to either live a long, forgettable life or a short, legendary one. He chose legend. The Trojan War itself was fought because of events set in motion by divine desire, and Achilles was the warrior who embodied the glory and tragedy of that conflict. In marble, he stands as the perfect warrior, muscles carved with anatomical precision, face showing noble determination. But Achilles had one fatal vulnerability, his heel, the one place where his immortal mother failed to protect him when she dipped him in the river Styx. That single moment of imperfection, that single point of weakness, is what killed the greatest warrior who ever lived. An arrow from Paris, guided by Apollo, struck that heel and legend ended. The Greek understood tragedy in a way few cultures ever did. They carved it, celebrated it, and learned from it that even perfection is incomplete. We have walked through the halls of gods and heroes, and now we come to the final section, the monsters. These creatures represent the boundaries of the civilized world, the things that lurked beyond the edge of order. And of all of them, one was so terrifying that the Greeks could barely depict her fully. She was not always a monster. She was a beautiful woman named Medusa, and we have come full circle. Because Medusa was the gateway to understanding that the real monsters in Greece were not born as monsters. The Minotaur, Cerberus the three-headed guardian of the underworld, the Hydra, the Furies that pursued murderers across the earth, all were rendered in marble as objects of terror and fascination. But the final sculpture that most museum visitors remember, the one that haunts them, is always Medusa, not as a victim but as a reminder. Her serpent hair, her eyes that could kill, her beauty mixed with monstrosity. She is the symbol that the Greeks carved again and again, because she represents something they feared more than any god or monster. She represents injustice. Every god of ancient Greece, carved in stone. Every hero, every monster, every myth rendered in marble and kept alive for over 2,000 years. The Greeks believed that stone could capture divinity, that permanence could outlast mortality. And they were right. As long as we walk these halls and see these sculptures, the gods remain alive. Which god deserves to be feared most? Tell me in the comments below. And subscribe to walk the next hall of gods in stone, where we'll explore new pantheons, new heroes, and the eternal mysteries carved in marble.